we begin in South Africa. Of course, they've had the elections. ANC has lost their majority. They've been talking for the past, 12 days now about a coalition. We don't yet have a coalition. The parliament is supposed to be sitting tomorrow. President Ramaphosa has skipped the G7 meeting that's going on in Italy because he says he has to address issues here they're in the country. And MKP, they're saying that there was rigging in the election and that the parliament should not sit. So how do we stabilize things? We're happy to have the Africa head of the Eurasia Group, Amaka Anku, with us to answer those questions. Amaka, good morning to you. Great to have you again on the show.
Good to be here, as usual.
I would love to get your assessment of what you've seen from the elections up until all the dialogue and parliament sitting tomorrow. What have you made of it all?
Look, the ANC's decline in the votes was pretty dramatic, right? All the way from 57 to 40%. Huge shift for South Africa. At Eurasia Group, we see this really heralding a much more unstable period in South Africa's politics. Sort of much more unstable for policy as well, right? And you mentioned this, that they're looking to form a government, which could include different parties with different ideologies. So we see this really being a lot more unstable for South Africa.
Is this what the people wanted, though? Because I want to give you a quote from the spokeswoman of the ANC. She essentially said that, hey, listen, South Africans want us to work together because that's what they voted for. Yeah, this is Malengi Bengu Motsiri. The best option at this point is looking at the government of national unity because this is what the people of South Africa said to us. Put together a multi-party arrangement that works for the benefit of South Africa. Is she right? What do you make of that?
This is what the ANC wants because it's very hard for them to pick one side of the political spectrum, right? I mean, I would say, look, South Africans want jobs. Right. They want to put food on the table. But the reason the ANC needs to do this government of national unity is because if you go with the DA is seen as sort of the white minority party, even though the markets like the DA because they're more for fiscal prudence. But the results of the election really doesn't... The big winner was the MK party. Right. What does the MK party stand for? It's almost opposite from what the DA stands
exactly.
for. So if you're the ANC, even though the top leadership of the ANC wants to work with the DA, you've pretty much almost just been repudiated in the election. It's very hard for you to just go that way. And so this is the way to kind of bridge the gap, bridge the middle. You bring in the DA in some capacity. You bring in maybe not the MK party itself, but some parties like it, like the EFF. Yeah. And hopefully you can still do better in the next election. That's how they are thinking about it.
I like the operative word, hopefully. So Ibrahim Fakir, he is, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's an analyst with, I think, Better Demographics of South Africa. Pull up his quote here. He thinks that things are going to be a bit tough. So here he says that it's completely up in the air. There's too many variables. He says there's too many things that different parties want. Is that not I guess a recipe for chaos? Or will the adults in the room sort it out? What do you make of what he's saying?
Yeah, this is why I said we think this is going to be a much more unstable period. Yeah. I think the most likely outcome is that you have a coalition in government with a party like the EFF. So the EFF is the Economic Freedom Fighters, who are very left, to the left of the ANC. They want more spending, they want nationalization. So
of things mines and banks.
But
they want to seize land.
That's
and not
very radical.
And not give compensation.
But the reason that they've gained traction, the point is that they think that the process of transforming the economy to get more jobs and economic benefits to Black people has gone too slow. That's the core of it, right? But you need to bring them in because of the results of the election. Right. But you're probably still going to have some support from the DA, maybe in parliament, even if they're not in government. Right. And I think that's how the adults in the room can figure it out, right? Yeah. The problem is that it becomes a little bit piecemeal. Maybe the ANC has to pass its budget with the support of the DA because the ANC doesn't want a really big budget. They don't want to blow out the budget. They want to keep the rand stable. The DA can support them on that. But they still have to do some things on the social side because they still have to think about the next election. There's an election coming up in 2 years,
right.
a local election coming up in 2 years. So they might still do some stuff on the social side in terms of social grants and stuff, maybe with the EFF.
Yeah.
Because the DA doesn't want that. So it's going to be piecemeal.
See, this is why I brought you on the show, because you've put everything in place here, and you do sound optimistic, and I like that, even though you said that you guys are saying things. There's a doomsday forecast from a gentleman, I think it's from Wells Fargo, FX strategist, emerging market economist. I think we've got Brendan McKenna. A couple quotes here, because he thinks that things are just going to go south. So he says, I think a government of national unity would likely result in policy paralysis and a stalled reform agenda, possibly even a government that does not include Ramaphosa. In fact, I wanted to ask you about that. And then also, I think he also said here, he says also incorporating EFFC and possibly MKP ideologies into policy would likely result in fiscal slippage and a broader worsening of, as if South Africa's finances were not bad enough already, as well as less policy predictability over the long term. So is he being too negative? What do you think?
No.
He's not?
No, I mean, I started off saying that we think that this is going to be a much more unstable period.
Yeah.
So he's right that it's a lot more policy unpredictability. I do not think, though, that Ramaphosa goes
Okay, you think he stays?
Yes, he stays for now. The operative word is for now. So ANC wants him to stay because there's no clear alternative who would take over after him. DA wants him to stay because right now he's the best of the lot in their minds from the ANC. MK doesn't want him to stay, but they're not going to do a deal with the MK. So right for now, it's probably Ramaphosa until they figure out who's next.
Right.
So it's possible that he goes, but within 2 years.
Really? What do you make of him skipping the G7 in order to stay home and focus on?
He would have been crazy not to. What? They have to form a government. Speaking of government, tomorrow they have to elect a president, speaker, and deputy speaker, and that's how the government will be formed.
Right.
So government is formed, and then the chaos can come in. What legislation can we actually pass in this government? But at least there'll be a government. He would have been crazy to leave now.
But G7 is pretty important, don't you think?
If you don't have a government, you're in trouble.
What's the point of you going? Yeah. All right, you did mention the economic issues. I think I heard you mention unemployment or something. But looking at the raft of issues that South African economy is facing, from unemployment, income inequality, corruption, and the likes, on the positive side, can they say, okay, listen, we have to do this for the people, and then, do the adults end up working things out? At least if we put the people first.
Yeah.
Right, better than political interests.
Let me say this.
Yeah.
I do not envy South African policymakers.
Right.
Because it's very difficult the structural issues are tough, right? Like you basically have South Africa. South Africa is like the combination of Middle Europe and Ajegunle tied together. Right? Yeah. And for people who don't know, for non-Nigerian listeners, that's like a slum in Lagos, right? So you can't really focus on, sometimes we focus on headline growth numbers, but the problem is what's behind those headline growth numbers? Who is it? Are we growing the financial sector, which doesn't include 80% of South Africans? Are we growing, the incomes for people at the bottom? So I think, and that's very difficult to do. So what South Africa has been doing has been that they have a pretty big budget for social grants because they're trying to figure out how to keep living wages for people who are currently very poor and don't have jobs.
Right.
But then that takes away money to spend on investments.
Right.
For productivity.
Yeah.
The key question for South Africa is how do you balance the two? And how much time do you have? Because the more you try to do investment that could get you growth and build more jobs in 10, 20 years, the people who don't have jobs today, who are really poor today, can they wait 10, 20 years? Will you still be in government in 20 years?
Gotcha. Yeah.
That's why I say I don't envy them. So it's very difficult to do. But that is the dilemma. How do you balance actually investing for growth with stabilizing poverty today?
Right. That's the tough thing. But just final thoughts. This is representative democracy, is it not? That's the parliamentary system. Yeah. That's what works. That's it.
Yeah.
Amaka Anku, Africa head at Eurasia Group. Always a pleasure having you join us to talk about issues around the African continent. We really do appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.